What's up, guys, and welcome back to Techplant. Today we're going to be making a cool do-it-yourself pendant grow light. Let's check it out.
So typically you see these LED light bulbs used in certain ways. It usually is in a lamp or hanging from these pendant cords, and they look pretty gross. Ew! So we're going to spice this thing up and we're going to do it cost effectively. So let's get to it. So to make a more trendy and aesthetic light bulb fixture, we are going to need three things. One, a much nicer pendant cord. This one is like a braided cord, so there's fabric on it, and that's going to give it more of a fancy appeal. We're going to need our grow light bulb, and then finally we're going to use soup can technology for our actual like light shield or light hood. So the first step is going to be to modify our can so we can attach this light cord to it. Make sure if you guys do order a light cord, you are getting one that can have modifiers attached to it. So that has this little portion that you can unscrew and then insert into, say, like a lampshade and screw it back on. If it's missing this, it's not going to work. So I'm just going to use the inner circle of the attachment because it has quite a wide lip, so as long as the hole is about that size, the lip can take care of any like minor discrepancies in the size of the hole. So I'm just going to trace this to give myself an area to cut and try and center it as best as possible. I'm going to be using a power drill for most of these steps, so I'm just going to get one hole started and then we're going to use pliers to continue on. Because these cans are pretty thin, if you don't have a drill, this probably isn't the safest, but you could probably put a screwdriver on there and just hit it really hard from behind and it should punch a hole. We're basically just getting a starter hole so we can start tearing out the aluminum. Once you got a starter hole, you can try and perforate this aluminum or steel. I don't know what these cans are made out of, but I'm using a razor just to put a line all the way around, hoping that when I start to tear the metal away, since I don't have a Dremel or anything, if it hits that line, it will tear along the line. So I'm kind of trying to perforate the can just to help my poor tearing of metal along a little better so the lines are a little cleaner. Next, this is a little finicky and you do have to be careful because a lot of the aluminum can parts end up being pretty sharp actually. They're very thin and they're very jagged, very sharp, so it's probably best if you can wear like utility gloves or something to protect your hands. I don't really have any excuses for that, but I just didn't put any on. But basically, you're going to take a needle nose or a cutter and just cut out and snip around, and you can kind of twist it once you grab it, and it should tear the metal. And just be careful that you don't tear too much outside of your perforation line. It should help a little bit, but you still have to be careful. You can see it sort of worked for a good portion of it, but sometimes it did break out, and I think that's where I started a new line on the other one. It kind of ripped past. But for the most part, the perforation idea actually worked pretty well, so I definitely recommend doing that. The better you do it, the better results you'll have with your hole. At this point, you should have a pretty jaggedly cut hole, and it is sharp and unsafe, so to make it a little easier to work with and a little safer, I am taking a screwdriver and sort of pushing it around the hole, trying to bend the cut part down and inward, and it should clean and smooth up the hole a little bit and make it wide enough for our pendant light fixture to fit through. So do this very carefully and with gloves because again this stuff is really sharp and if you slip you can get cut really badly. So do be careful. Once you've done that, you should have something that looks like this. You can see the edges are more rounded now and it's a little safer from the outside. You could still cut yourself if you put your fingers underneath and slide them around. So definitely keep your fingers out of the hole and you should be good. But this does clean up the entrance a lot better and it shouldn't be all jagged and shouldn't cut or ruin any fixture you put in there. Alright, now we have to cut some ventilation holes. If you use a higher wattage light bulb, it's going to create a lot more heat and we don't want heat to build up because the big hole is where the pendant's going to go and that's going to seal up, and so we need a way for heat to escape so it doesn't build up within the can, further making this like a house fire device. So we're going to drill some holes. I don't really know a good way of like lining up holes, so I just found a long piece of paper I can wrap around the can, cut it to length so it's the exact length of the can, and then I can mark lines along the paper if that makes any sense, and I can space them out pretty evenly. This can ends up being almost an entire foot with a little extra, so I put a mark on every inch and then I saw that there's a little bit left over, so I tried to move the line further and further along the paper, and that should give you a decent spacing. You kind of eyeball it, nothing's perfect, but it should be good enough. Then once you've done that, you can put the paper back around the can and transfer the lines onto the can rim, if that makes sense. It should be pretty clear in the video. And once you've got your lines transferred, again, you can decide on your spacing. I think the more ventilation, the better, but if you put too many holes, you will weaken it, although there's not much weight on this because it's just a shroud on the light after all, so it's not like it needs to be like structurally critical or whatever, but I'm just going to place some holes, not randomly, but on the lines all the way around, and that should be plenty good. Before I end up drilling the actual holes though, I'm using a screw in this situation, but there is something called like a center punch, and you can put it on each dot, you whack it with a hammer, and that gives you a small indentation so that way the drill doesn't drift as you try and push it through the metal, and it allows it to go right in where you want it to go. This is actually a pretty crucial step, because if you don't do that, every time you try and drill a hole, it's going to move a little bit before it goes through and you'll get wonky. So you should definitely do this. You don't need a center punch, a screw will work just fine. Once you've got the center punches hit, then you can just start drilling holes. If you want, you can vary the hole size. Maybe the inner ones are smaller, outer ones are larger. I use the same bit at this point because most people shouldn't even see the top because it's hanging somewhere. So it's up to you if you want to do this at home a different way. Just as long as you got vent holes, you should be good. One of the next steps you might want to do just to clean things up is get some sort of large screwdriver, stick it in the holes, and twist it back and forth and try and deburr the holes. When you drill them, it does mess up the holes. It's not a clean drill. Because we're dealing with such thin metal, it pulls it out, it gets it all nasty and gross. And again, it's a cutting hazard or just a snagging hazard. Not a huge deal, but you can clean it up quite simply by just spinning a screwdriver around. I do have like an actual deburring tool, but most people probably don't have that, so just a big screwdriver should do a pretty good job. Once you've done that, the holes should be a lot cleaner, a lot less snaggy, and less sharp. And again, most of the sharpness should be like inward to the can. You can sand it up a little bit too at the very end just to clean it up. And we are going to be painting this can, so I would recommend sanding everything just a little bit, just so the paint sticks better. I'm using some steel wool on the rim of the actual can. Just to clean it up, make it a lot more shiny and beautiful, because I'm going to leave that. I'm not going to paint the rim. I think a little silver rim on the black can is going to give it that premium feel. It's going to look a little more aesthetic and a little more like intentional, if that makes sense. So let's clean that up good and let's tape it off good so none of the paint gets on there, because our next step is going to be painting. I did the painting outside and I did not film it because it was at night, but just take a can of black spray paint, or really whatever color you want. That's the best beauty of like do-it-yourself stuff, is you can do all kinds of crazy things. You could even tape off a pattern or try 2 different colors, whatever you want. That's the beauty of it. I chose black just because it looks cool, and I painted it up pretty nice, and I think it looks pretty good. Now it's time to take off the actual tape and see how that silver rim turned out, and it turned out quite beautifully actually. It gives it that little bit of an accent to it, so it's not just a black can, and I think it adds that premium aesthetic feel. Make sure you don't rush this job though when you paint it, and let it actually dry. I got a nice thumbprint on the top. I mean, no one's gonna see it, so whatever, but it would have been nice if I took my time, so definitely take your time. Alright, now it is time for assembly. You can take your pendant light, unscrew that one bit that we saw earlier, insert the pendant light through the hole, and then you're going to screw that little thing back on, and that will secure our shroud to our light cord, and it's going to start looking pretty cool already. When you are screwing it in, do make sure your fingers don't get near the holes and stuff, because remember, we pushed all the sharp stuff on the inside. This is a do-it-yourself thing, so there are some like inherent dangers and risks, so do be careful. Once you got it screwed in, it should look something like this. I did not paint the inside of the can. I don't know why. I guess you could have, but usually cans have a plastic liner or some sort of like liner on the inside. It's not actually just metal, so I didn't really screw with that because I didn't want to see problems. So you could if you want to and see what happens. The last step then is just really screwing in the light bulb, and that should be pretty much it for assembly, and then we just have to plug it in and test it out. I've got it hanging above my YouTube setup, and already it looks pretty cool. As long as you're not like analyzing it from an inch away with your eyes, it looks pretty legit. I think it looks pretty neat. And for maybe, what, $20 total to build this thing, it's pretty awesome. I put one of my anthuriums underneath just so we can get a look at how it looks with an actual plant underneath, how the light works, and it's pretty cool. A lot of these like pendant light bulb styles, they're all sort of spotlighty, so it's not like you can light hundreds of plants with them. They're usually to display like 1 or 2 or 3 pretty cool plants. Obviously, if you raise it higher, you can get more plants underneath there. But the nice thing about this do-it-yourself build is at this cost, I mean, even with the cords, it was a 3-pack, so I already have 2 more cords. All I need is 2 more cans, 2 more light bulbs, and then I can make even more. So it's pretty awesome. I think once you give it context with the plant, it really starts to look pretty fantastic. For being a soup can on a cord, it's pretty darn nice. Also, just a disclaimer, if you do build this thing at your house, it's really up to you on how you do it and whether you put light bulbs in that it can handle or not. This potentially could be a fire hazard if the light bulb builds up way too much heat inside that can. So it's kind of do it at your own risk, just so you know. I will have some links in my description to the stuff I used, but again, I have no idea how safe this really is. My can doesn't seem to be heating up at all, but who knows? It could vary by light bulbs or whatever. So definitely be careful if you decide to do this at home.
Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. I thought it was pretty fun to make. It was kind of a funny idea at first, but it actually turned out pretty nice, and it looks comparable to some of the more expensive brands out there that sell lights like this. So if you guys don't want to drop hundreds of dollars on lights, this is a good alternative to get somewhere close. I mean, again, you could put a few of them up and it could look pretty nice as long as you don't look too close. Anyways, guys, I hope you like this content, and as always, may your plants grow strong and healthy. I'll see you next time.